Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm the TMax. I make videos about language, culture, and travel. And it has been a while since I made a video about false friends, and I know everybody loves them. And since it's been such a long time, I have a long list that we're gonna jump into right now. Okay, so let's first start with the only Chinese false friend I've heard since I've been here. Baba in Portuguese means nanny, not father like it means in Chinese. And if you want to say father in Portuguese, that's o pai. And I have two in French for you as well. Colchon, which is not cochon, like a pig. It actually means mattress in Portuguese. If you want to say pig, that's porco. And then if you read the word caisse written, it looks like caisse, which would be box in French. And if you want to say box in Portuguese, that is caixa. I know I was reaching for those, right? Don't worry, we have like a billion Spanish ones later. Okay, moving on to English. We have quite a few here as well. So the first one is costume, which looks like costume, but it actually means habit. If you want to say costume, that's fantasia. And then we have lame. I have to pronounce both E's. Lame. Lame. It's the third person plural of they read. If you want to say something is lame, then you would say it's chato. So when you read the word ranger, it looks like the word ranger in English. And ranger actually means to squeak, like a mouse would squeak. And if you want to say ranger, like in a park, it's guarda florestal. When you read the word depressa, kind of looks like maybe he or she is depressed. Depressa actually means quickly. If you want to say depressed, you would actually use the word deprimido. And when you hear the word mouse, it's not the actual animal. It's actually the plural masculine of bad. Something that's bad would be mau, and then bad things would be mouse. But if you want to say mouse like a living creature, you'd say rato. But if you're referring to a mouse like on a computer, you actually just say mouse. And the verb comparecer doesn't mean to compare. It actually means to attend or to show up. If you want to say compare, you would use the word comparar. Parabéns is how they say congratulations or happy birthday. It doesn't refer to the man-made chemicals that we call parabens. And if you want to say that, it's parabenos. When you hear the word goalie, it's not the guy in football or soccer that's defending the goal. It actually refers to a drink or a gulp. If you want to talk about the guy that's defending the goal in football or soccer, that's goleiro. Hyena is not a hyena. And if you read it, you can tell. But when you hear it, you're like, hold on, what? Hyena actually means queen in Portuguese. And if you want to say hyena in Portuguese, it's hiena. So if you ever hear a teacher talking about testes, they're referring to exams. And if you want to use the word testicles, or if you want to say testes in Portuguese, it's testículos. So the verb sequestrar doesn't mean to sequester or to isolate. It actually means to kidnap. And if you want to say sequester or isolate, you would say isolar. The verb procurar doesn't mean to procure, like to get or to obtain. It actually means to look for or to seek out. If you want to say to obtain something, you would use the verb obter. And when you read the word fingir, it looks like finger, but fingir actually means to pretend or to fake. And if you want to say finger, you would say dedo. Farto. It doesn't mean I fart. It actually means to be fed up. It's an adjective. So estou farto, I am fed up. So if you want to say I fart in Portuguese, it's peido. Batom is not a baton. Batom is actually lipstick. If you want to say baton, it's baston. Laser is not a laser. When you spell it like this, it's actually leisure. If you want to say laser, it's laser, but it's spelled with an S instead of a Z. Doer is not somebody who gets things done, like a doer. It actually is the verb for to hurt. If you want to talk about someone who gets things done, you would use the word fazedor. So when you read the word regime, first thing that comes into mind is probably regime, like a political group. And yeah, that's exactly what it means. But it's also the word they use for diet here. So someone who's following a regime is probably following a diet, not a political group. Or maybe you need to ask more questions. The word Peru in Portuguese refers to the country, Peru, but it is also the word for Turkey. So it's funny that the word for a country is the name of this animal and a country. Like in English, we have Turkey and the word turkey. Okay, so now that we've finished those short lists of false friends, let's get into the Spanish list. And let me caveat right here and say that the Spanish that I learned was Spanish from Spain. So some of these words may or may not make sense to Spanish speakers from other countries. So when a Spanish speaker hears the word lesionar, they probably think to get hurt, to hurt yourself. But lecionar actually means to teach in Portuguese. And if you want to say to get hurt, you would use the word machucar. A bicho would be a bicho in Spanish, and that would be normally an insect. But here, bicho actually refers to beasts or animals. And if you want to say insect in Portuguese, it's insecto. And that's without a C, insecto, no C. In Spain, when you hear the word perito, you think little dog. But perito in Brazil actually means expert. And if you want to say little dog, you say cachorrinho. And if I go on a cita in Spain, that means I'm going on a date. But in Brazil, I'm probably reciting a quote. If I want to say date in Brazil, I would say encontro. And we have already heard that no has other meanings, but this time, this no with the accent over the O doesn't mean like an emphatic no. It actually means not. And we also learned before that manga could refer to the fruit mango, but it also refers to sleeves on your shirt. So in Spain, if you hear desenvolver, you think unwrap. But desenvolver in Portuguese actually means to develop. If you want to say unwrap, it's desembrulhar. In Spain, when you hear the word oficina, you think office. And in Brazil, if you hear oficina, that's actually like a workshop. And if you want to say office, you would say escritorio, which also in Spanish would mean like a desk where you work at. And it can mean this in Brazil as well, but normally they would use mesa. So if I hear DJ in Spain, I think DJ. But in Brazil, DJ actually means defeated. And if you want to say DJ, it's actually GJ or DJ, depending on their sotaque. In Spain, when you hear the word tela, you think fabric. But if you say tela in Brazil, it means screen. And if you want to say fabric in Brazil, you would say pano. When you hear queda in Spain, you probably think to stay somewhere. And it actually means like a fall. Like if somebody had a fall, they had a queda in Brazil. And if you want to say to stay somewhere, you would use the verb ficar. And if you read the word borracha in Spain, you probably think it's a drunk female, borracha. But it's actually an eraser in Brazil. If you want to refer to a drunk woman, you would use the word bébeda. And in Spain, when you hear cara, the first thing that probably pops in your mind would be a face. And it can mean that in Brazil, but normally it's used to refer to a guy, a dude. And if you say the word face in Brazil, you're probably going to say rostro. If you have a gemela in Spain, that means you have a twin sister. But if you have a gemela in Brazil, that means you have an eye booger. And if you want to say twin sister, you would say gemia. When you hear the word pronto in Spain, you think soon. It's going to happen soon. But pronto in Brazil actually means ready, like I'm ready, to be ready. And if you want to talk about something that's going to happen soon, or you want to use the word soon, you would say logo. I had mentioned back in a few videos before the word porra, which is an expletive here in Brazil. But when you read it in Spanish, porra, it actually means like a nightstick that a police officer would use. And obviously that's not what it means here in Brazil. And if you want to refer to a nightstick here in Brazil, you would say cacetete. And in Spain, when you hear the word expediente, you're probably thinking like a file. Like if somebody has a police file or there's a file for a business somewhere, you'd use this word expediente. But in Brazil, expediente refers to the hours of operation of a business. If you want to refer to a file, like a physical file that people use or used to use, you would say relatorio. Now in Spain, when you would read the word reto, you would read it as reto, which would be a challenge. And here in Brazil, reto means straight. And if you want to say the word challenge, you would use the word desafio. And in Spain, if somebody gives you a propina, that means they're giving you a tip. But in Brazil, if somebody's giving you a propina, that's a bribe. And if you want to say tip in Brazil, you would say gorjeta. So in Spain, if you ask someone, mi canta, that means, are you singing to me? But in Brazil, if you said mi canta, that means, are you hitting on me? And if you want to ask someone if they're singing to you, you would say, canta para mí. So if somebody takes a padrón in Spain, that means they're taking a census or they're doing a census. But padrón in Brazil is the standard for something. So the pattern that you need to follow. And if you want to say census in Brazil, you would use the word censo. And in Spain, when you hear the word cesta, the first word that comes to mind is basket. And that also is what it means here in Brazil, but cesta also refers to sixth, the sixth something. For example, sexta-feira, the sixth day, the sixth fair day, which is Friday. So cesta, sixth, is pronounced the same way as cesta, basket, but spelled differently. So when you hear the word mal in Spain, it just means bad. But in Brazil, the word mal could mean barely, which would be apenas in Spanish, which in Brazil, apenas means just. But in Spain, you would say solo. But solo in Brazilian Portuguese is the floor. So yeah, that whole chain of events just happened. So let's look at some words where they do mean the same thing in Brazil and in Spain, but in Brazil, it has another secondary meaning that sometimes is more popular than the other meaning. For example, gozar. So this word in Spain just means to enjoy yourself, enjoy life. It's the only meaning it has. And in Brazil, it has this meaning too, but like most slang that are related to sex, that becomes a primary meaning. And gozar is another way of saying to climax. And if you hear mata in Spain, you think he or she kills. And in Brazil, that could be true, but mata also refers to the woods or the forest. So if you hear torcida in Spain, you probably think it's something that's twisted, and it can mean that in Brazil, but torcida is also the name of someone who's a really devout fan for a sports team or football probably. So if somebody says, I'm a torcida, it doesn't mean that they're a twisted person, it means that they're a fan of a team. So in Spain, when you hear the word salada, you think of the adjective salty, like something is salty. But salada in Brazil means salad. And if you want to use the word salty, you have to say salgada. So when you hear the word visto in Spain, you're probably thinking of something that was seen. But in Spain, it could also talk about something that somebody wore. And both these meanings also exist in Brazilian Portuguese. But one extra word they have in Brazil for visto is visa. That's the word they use for visa. So I guess if you wear something and you were seen in it, that picture goes in your visa. So now you visto. So almorzar in Spain does refer to a meal, but normally this is like a snack before lunch, which would be comida. And in Brazil, almuerzo is the lunch, but comida is lunch in Spain, not almuerzo. And in Brazil, almuerzo is lunch. So if you hear the word apagar in Spain, you think to turn off something, and that is true usually for like lights or electronics in Brazil. But apagar also means to erase something, like off of a board or on a piece of paper. You apagar, you erase. And in Spain, when you hear the word bala, you're probably thinking of a bullet in a gun, and it means the same thing here in Brazil. But bala is also referred to as a type of candy here that kids like to eat. Brazilian kids like to eat bullets. Let's look at some examples where the word is almost the same, but the sex is different to mean the same thing in different languages. For example, partido in Spain refers to a game or a match, like a football game. But if you want to say that same thing in Brazil, you have to say partida. And partida in both languages can refer to somebody's leaving. And then both languages have a very similar expression to mean I just did something. So in Spanish, it would be acabou in the present, acabo de, whatever. And in Portuguese, it's acabei de. So you have to use the past tense. So what did you think of this crazy list of false friends and half friends between the different languages that I speak? If you have more to add, put them in the comments below. These are so fascinating to me, so I keep making videos about them. It's a lot of fun to just kind of nitpick the language and be like, hey, this is the same or different or whatever. And if you haven't, check out the other video that I made about some interesting words and expressions and even some complaining that I did about learning Portuguese. Again, picking apart the language, but that video is more general and this one's just about false friends. So yeah, check it out, probably up here somewhere. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.